Not too shabby, right?
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
I'll take it.
This book is it's fantastic. I feel like you articulate at the top. And also, I should say this: you just got word this is a New York Times bestseller, baby. Right?
It is.
Number one.
It is. No, not number one.
Not number one.
Not number one.
Not number one, but a bestseller.
Right by the skin of our teeth, but I'll take it.
Oh, you take it. This grew out of a newsletter you were writing called Abortion Every Day.
Yeah.
Why did you feel the need to start a newsletter, Abortion Every Day?
I mean, I probably should have called it Abortion Every Hour because that's how often the news is coming out, breaking about abortion. The attacks are just so unrelenting. They're nonstop. And I think I just wanted to provide a little bit of order to the chaos to help people understand what was going on and sort of, same thing with the book, give them the information, context, language that they need to talk about this issue because people really do care so much. People are so pissed off about abortion bans. They're so upset, but they're also so overwhelmed, right? It's just so much to be happening. And so I wanted to create something that people could really use in a useful way and also channel a little bit of anger.
Yeah, it feels like this book is there to provide clarity for people who want to engage in the conversation but perhaps don't know how.
Yeah, absolutely.
Post-Dobbs, for the people who maybe, I don't want to say tuned out post-Dobbs, but I think for a lot of people, if you're not paying close attention to the news each day or what's happening on a state level, perhaps even if you live in a blue state, after Dobbs, even if you care about the abortion issue, it seems as if your head jumps to federal abortion ban. Is that the new next battle? What are people missing if they're not paying attention to what's happening in some of these other states?
That's a great question. I'm still very state-focused, right? Because it's such a crisis on the ground in these states. You're talking about places where OBGYNs are leaving by the busload. Places like Idaho have lost 25% of their OBGYNs. And as we've seen with horror story after horror story, hospitals are not treating patients, right? Like, it is not a normal state of affairs when we're letting miscarrying, bleeding women go home, when we're sending them home. And so I think we need to be paying attention to what is happening on the ground. But yes, certainly with the election coming up, I'm very, very worried about the possibility of a national ban or even anything Trump could do outside of a national ban to make abortion harder to get, like the Comstock Act, replacing the head of the FDA to make abortion medication illegal.
Now, I know there's been some softening in the discussion on the conservative side. When you hear J.D. Vance softening on that issue, how much do you believe him on a scale from 0 to get the out of here?
Yeah, it's definitely get the out of here.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's true. No, he's totally full of it, right? And the softening is all a PR move, right? Like, it's all, and this is why I wrote the book, because they're using this language to make it appear as if they are more moderate than they actually are on abortion, using terms like minimum national standard. I don't support a ban, I support a minimum national standard. Those are the same exact thing, right? And so it's just a bunch of nonsense. We've seen the same thing with Trump, but we know what would happen if Trump was elected. We know that the suffering that we've already seen in so many states across the country would just get exponentially worse.
It's curious in your book you talk about sort of the battle over language, which we've seen go way back, whether it's pro-choice, pro-life, but you kind of get into the nitty-gritty about, like, Nikki Haley talking about consensus, talking about what late-term abortions mean. Like, for folks who aren't paying attention, why is that so important, and how do you see that getting morphed and shifted right now?
Sure. I mean, this is how they trick voters, right? So they use words like, I don't want a ban, I want consensus legislation. We're not banning abortion, we're giving it back to the will of the people, we're giving it back to the states. Because this is something voters feel so strongly about, 81% of voters do not want government involvement in abortion at all. They don't want it regulated by the law. They are working really hard to use language that makes it sound as if voters are with them, right? They're trying to do this very clever pivot. And with something like late abortion, which is not a real medical term, they're constantly moving the goalposts for what late abortion means. So when you hear someone like Nikki Haley say, I'm against late abortion, ask her how many weeks that is. Because right now, I've been tracking the anti-abortion movement, right now, to them, that's 12 weeks. So when they say, I support consensus legislation for late-term abortion, they're saying, I support a national ban at 12 weeks. That's how you have to sort of decode the language.
When I go out, so I go out to Trump rallies a lot.
Yeah.
But I will talk to people in the MAGA movement sometimes about abortion, and this book would be very helpful for some of that. I find what I run into a lot. How do you engage with people who come from a religious perspective, or at least use that as the card in which they will not engage with that? Do you?
Yeah.
How legitimate is that argument, or are you wasting your time having these conversations with people who put up abortion underneath their religious beliefs, and it's not up for debate?
Sure. I mean, I feel really strongly that you shouldn't waste your activist energy. It's a precious resource, right? You shouldn't be talking to brick walls, but we all care about someone who is conservative, religious, you feel like you want to change their mind. I think pointing out that there are so many people who are religious, who still understand that their personal and religious beliefs shouldn't dictate what other people do with their bodies. I do think that that is something that works. But I also really think that it can be a distraction. This idea that we need to go out and change hearts and minds. Because American voters are with us. Americans, when it comes to voters, they know they want abortion legal, period. This is true in red states. This is true across the country.
Yeah.
It really is. And when we get dragged into this idea that we need to go out and take that activist energy and waste it on trying to change someone's mind who's never going to change their mind, that's a real issue. At the end of the day, this is a problem of a small group of extremist legislators imposing their will on the vast majority of voters. And so I think of it not as changing people's minds. It's a democracy issue. It's making sure people can vote. It's making sure that we don't have voter intimidation. That is the stuff that I'm really most focused on.
So when you look at the energy best use,
yeah.
In that fight, it's not in those conversations necessarily. It's aimed at local legislators. It's aimed at getting people out to vote.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at right now, abortion is on the ballot in 10 states, and in every single state where abortion is on the ballot, Republicans have worked overtime to make it impossible for voters to have a say, because they know that when voters have a direct say on abortion rights wins, right? Just this week in Florida, I wrote about Governor Ron DeSantis. His administration is threatening television stations with criminal charges if they run ads for Amendment 4, which is the pro-choice amendment down in Florida. They will do anything they can to stop voters from knowing the truth about these laws and from getting to the polls.
Wow. Yeah, and Mickey Mouse, too. They're not against that. Why even go to Florida anymore, for God's sake?
So sad.
When you look at this and see the legislators who are behind this, perhaps the DeSantis, but even more on the local level,
sure.
How much of this do you see as right-wing legislators who are using this as a way to gain power within their party, perhaps not true believers, but
sure.
using it as a form of manipulation? And how much of this you talk about legislators who are doing this to exert control over women's bodies in some dark terms?
Yeah.
When you look overall at that, how much of it is just a blatant move to be in a position of power, and how much of it is exerting power of a woman's body?
I think it's both. I wrote a column once called "The Worst Guy You Know." Like, think about the biggest asshole from high school,
okay.
Right? The guy who is like devil's advocate, always had something to say. That's who the prosecutor is now. That's who the local legislator is now. That's who the sheriff is, who are bringing forward these cases. So when you look at the people who are really enforcing these laws on a local and state level, they're the worst guy you know. They're the worst kind of person you can possibly imagine. That said, I do think that there are a lot of politicians who don't really care. They don't care. It's just about the power to them. Something that happened in Tennessee right after Roe was overturned, I think, is a really good example, where Republicans saw that people were really upset about abortion bans. And in Tennessee at the time, they didn't have an exception for women's lives. There was no exception. Doctors had to break the law in order to save someone's life with an abortion, and then explain why it was okay that they broke the law. And Republicans said, well, maybe we should get an exception on the books. They were so under the thumb of local pro-life groups, of big groups like Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. These groups were lobbying them not to have an exception for women's lives. So they very, very much are listening to sort of these other forces, and so it sort of doesn't matter what they think if they're just going to do what these groups say anyway.
I mean, if in dark times we have some of the worst guy you know from high school, what is the best guy you know from high school doing right now?
Oh, I love that question. probably making phone calls to get bus tickets for people to get out of Florida, to get an abortion out of state. I think one of the most amazing things about doing this work over the last 2+ years has been seeing the way that people have come together on this issue to make sure that people can get the care that they need no matter what. There are so many folks like abortion funds on the ground, which are in the middle of a funding crisis and could really use your help. There are so many people who are doing the hard work of ensuring that people can get those abortions. That is what brings me just a tremendous amount of hope and positivity for the future.
Well, it's a great book, and if you're tentative about getting in the conversation, this book will get your foot in the door. This book, Abortion, is available now. Jessica Valenti.